My fellow Americans,
how much worse can it get?
I know how disappointed you feel because
the vast majority of the media has said nothing of substance.
This is painful, and it will be for a long time. But I want you to remember this.
The change only happens when ordinary people get involved.
It will not be a peaceful change.
To quote the great Leonard Cohen,
it will be a usurpation.
And to all who are watching this,
Democrats or Republicans,
whether you are young or whether you're young at heart, I won't stop.
Those who ignore these elemental existential facts are traitors, and the usurper will live in infamy.
May God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.
Good evening, everyone. It is May 4th, Thursday, 2017, and welcome to another episode of The Discourse with Brandon, Adair, and Richard. If I sound different today, it's because I have some combination of allergies and, I don't know, the plague, and I'm a little bit under the weather. But I'm not going to let that stop us from having a little bit of fun. And I'm certain, I mean, even if it does stop me from being able to get health insurance in the future, but whatever. But that's neither here nor there. Joining me, as always, is my lovely producer, dreaded producer, Richard. Say hello, Richard.
Hello, everyone. Hello.
Unmute your microphone, of course.
Yeah, I think I got it this time. And I noticed some comments in the last few videos that we had loaded, and glad that people are enjoying the show, and so I'm really happy about that. I'm excited for today's show. We've got a special guest, and the feed it might be starting a little choppy, but just had a lot of things going at the top of the show, and it should smooth out as we get a little further into the show. I'll work on that.
Yeah, there's a bit of inclement weather on the West Coast as far as
yeah.
I know, so we might have a little bit of choppiness. I'm sorry ahead of time. You know, it is what it is. Independent media, blah, 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 excuses. I'm going to introduce Adair Shmidt. Say hello, Adair.
Hey, folks. Thank you for joining us tonight. It is really, really bad weather, so if it stops or a couple of us just kind of disappear on you, blame the weather and blame global warming, actually, in this incredibly strong convention that we're having right now. Multivariable calculus stuff.
Global warming is a myth made up by the Chinese, I swear.
Shut up. It's too early for your nonsense. Shut up.
Yes.
We have one more person with us, by the way.
Yeah, we have. Okay, so Zach is joining us right now, but I know I see him. Zach is joining us right now, but we can't hear you, Zach. So please.
Can you see me?
Yeah, we can see you. Now we can hear you. Perfect.
Okay. Yep. Cool.
Okay. So just before we start, I want to say two things. Just before we start, I want to say two real quick things. Thank you to all of our early patrons who have been supportive of the show, all our lovely fans so far, and a special message to Paul Ryan and the House Republicans. Fuck you. Paul Ryan is a death cultist, and he wants your grandmother, and poor people, to die in the streets. I don't know why. I mean, I feel bad. I feel bad for consistently picking on the Democrats, or rather being accused of. I'm consistently accused of picking on Democrats, and the reason why is because I have a hard time in providing cogent analysis of Republicans, because essentially they're a death cult. And so, if you ever have played Warhammer 40K, they're blood for the blood god, skull for the skull thrones, all those things. But that's neither here nor there. We'll get to the AHCA and the House stuff later. We are being joined by Zach Haller. Is it pronounced Haller?
It's Haller.
Zach Haller. And Zach has written a lovely piece on the class action suit.
Civil War.
No, it's not the Civil War. No, not the Civil War. Or maybe he has, I don't know. The class action lawsuit going on right now against the DNC that's being what? That's on behalf of basically a conglomeration of Sanders supporters and backers, right? So can you just tell us about your piece? I know right now it's available at various places, Progressive Army, on your Medium. So can you just break it down for our viewers real quick, or listeners?
Yeah, sure. So as many people know, last summer after a bunch of leaked emails kind of started to expose all of the behind-the-scenes collusion that was happening, where the Democrats worked with the Clinton campaign and some different entities to rig the primary. Basically, there was a class action lawsuit filed to claim the damages from the people who donated to the Democratic Party and to Bernie Sanders. It was filed last summer. Fast forward to now, we've got the Democrats filing second to dismiss the lawsuit, basically. So last week, there were oral arguments that the Democrats sent their lawyers, and those lawyers gave the judge their oral arguments as to why they think that the case should be taken down. And the transcripts from that hearing were released on Friday. So basically, my piece wrote up the kind of overall kind of jaw-dropping, like the biggest kind of bombshells that came out in that court hearing, because this is the first time that the DNC was on record talking about basically defending their motion to dismiss a class action lawsuit against them. So the transcripts were released on Friday. Jared Beck had argued the case on Tuesday on behalf of the Bernie Sanders supporters and Democrats and all Democratic Party donors. Jared Beck had given an interview, kind of explained the case to Mike Sinato on Real Progressives. I was watching it. I was just like on the edge of my seat, just like, I cannot believe what I'm hearing, listening to Jared's explanation from the courtroom. And then the transcripts came out Friday, and I read them like as quickly as I could, and I was just like hysterical, freaking out about all of the bombshells that were dropping. The DNC's lawyers were an absolute mess, and a lot came out, a lot unraveled. So I basically just kind of summarized it for everyone, and didn't really think that it would completely get ignored by the mainstream media. But obviously the mainstream media played a big role in helping the Democrats and Hillary Clinton achieve their rigged primary. So the mainstream media.
So definitely, right? So let's take this piece by piece. We'll start with the revelations themselves, then we'll talk about the main media's response, mainstream media's response to them. What I don't want to do here is I don't want to quibble over the definition of rigged, the definition of cheating, the definition of putting your finger on the scale in favor of Hillary Clinton. Like that's a useless argument. I think everyone who's in this chat room, for better or worse, is behind the general statement that the DNC gave preferable treatment to the Hillary Clinton campaign, despite the fact that their charter, I think section 4 or 5 of their charter says that they are a fair and impartial and neutral party in these primaries. So just like run us through a few of the big revelations as you put them in your article.
Sure. So it's kind of crazy how many kind of conflicting pieces of information they gave. So it's interesting to kind of go over the course of the lawsuit and see what they say and then what they backtrack on and things like that. But the first main thing is that right out the bat, the DNC is saying that the judge should dismiss the lawsuit filed against them because the judge shouldn't have standing to decide what the Democratic Party does with their nominating process in terms of following any legal, making sure that they are being held accountable for what the party is doing. So they basically first tell the judge, which it's crazy because for people who are outside of the legal industry and not in the courts all the time, maybe you forget what the courts are for. I don't know. But the first thing he said is basically, Judge, I know that you're a judge that's been seated at a court to decide things like this, but the first thing is you actually can't decide because we're a political party and can't political issues because that's business. So the first thing is basically, look, you can't even rule on this, so don't even start, don't even try. And that was the first half of the sentence, basically. And then the second half of that sentence was kind of coming to this idea of what impartial means. And they basically say that the party had the right to run the primary unfairly if they wanted to. They could have favored a candidate, but they didn't favor a candidate. So they kind of trapped themselves after saying, Judge, you can't rule on this because this is a party affair. After they say that, they say we shouldn't be held legally accountable for anything. And the definition of impartial can't be defined. So there's no way. It's honestly my head was spinning trying to interpret all of it, because they say the same thing and they contradict themselves so much, it's hard to even explain it. They literally, I'm trying to explain to you, they say you can't define what the word impartial means, but then they say, but we are saying that the primary was impartial, but we would have had the opportunity and we would have had no legal accountability whatsoever if we didn't want to run it impartially. So the first thing is they say, Judge, you can't really rule on this. And then the second main idea is this concept that there is no legal accountability if they want to run it impartially, but then they say they didn't run it impartially, even though it's impossible to define that word. It's fair.
Okay, so let me just see if I get this straight, right? So I've read your piece, obviously, so I'm kind of just running through it in my own head again as you're talking about it. So basically, there, the charter that Jared Beck is establishing as legally binding. This is despite being what essentially a private club or a private organization that through its actions and through its rhetoric presents itself and really makes money off of the generally perceived notion that it is a public good. It's somehow it's made itself, for better or worse, whether it's legally this or not, pretty much essential to the functioning of our government. But and it honestly doesn't dispute this openly, and it probably wouldn't dispute openly, but or not, for the worse. Basically, they're saying this legally binding charter is much like the pirates' code. It's it's a suggestion that they might follow when it's beneficial to them, but largely the primaries are open to whatever manipulation they feel is necessary in order to decide what candidate they want, right? So my initial question would, just hearing that, obviously you don't know the answer to this, be, well, then what is the actual purpose of the primary other than to give the illusion that you are having, that people have a choice within your party, right? So it seems to me that they have the primary, even though in their head they already know who they're going to pick. And if they're saying legally we can do that, okay, fine. I can believe that. I can walk with you, down that pier. It's a stupid one. And I use this analogy a lot, but I can go there. But the problem becomes, then why not just appoint Hillary Clinton without a primary? It seems as though you wanted to get people involved, give the illusion that you're having this sort of process entirely performatively, only to drop people, only to, when push comes to shove, mess with the results, mess with the, be actually biased towards one candidate, and then when confronted, say, well, we never had to be biased in the first place. My second point would be, and I know TYT talked about this, on the show, and I don't normally watch TYT. I'm not going to throw shade on them right now because that's just not appropriate. But it is what it is. What it. No, I don't normally watch TYT. They're kind of whatever. I'm not going to go in there right now. Maybe some other time. They put forth the idea that and this is a true story, true enough, that logic might be legally binding. It might be legally correct, but it's a little too cute for what they're trying to actually accomplish as a political party, and that it's incredibly amoral. It's that argument, while it might get them out of this class action suit, that constitutionally or legally the judge can't hold them accountable, it irreparably damages the perception of what they are in the public. And this is how not reporting it from the mainstream media becomes, in a lot of ways, malfeasance or complicity or complicitness, whatever the word is, with the party, which we know them to be, because this information getting out there to anyone who would hear it would damage the reputation of the party in a way that could not be repaired. And so, in watching the TYT interview, I think the one person who I agreed with, at least tangentially, was one with a sexy voice. I can't remember the deep voice, the one with the really deep voice whose name I don't know. I know John Idarola's voice. I know Michael Short's voice. I don't know what his name is. The other guy's name is the one whose voice, the one who sounds like he eats cigarettes and doesn't just smoke them. But so he made the point that, okay, even if this is not not a legally it's not going to get anyone any money, even if no one's going to get their $27 back, even if they were there's no way the judge to enforce this, I guess, suggestion that's the suggestion charter. At the very least, what it does is it lays bare the truth of the Democratic Party, that they are a private club, and that they are not accountable to their constituency in the way that people might think they are. And so I know I've been just rambling, and so I guess now we have to get to the point of well, hey, what does that mean for what does that mean for everybody? Like, what does that mean for everyone who's putting their faith in the Democratic Party if essentially they don't actually have to, behave democratically?
Yeah, well, I mean, the Democrats, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to phrase a follow-up piece on this. I've got it about half written, and it's really hard to explain it. But sorry, I've got some friends texting. So they're damned if they do, damned if they don't at this point. They really screwed themselves over, and the scenario in which they win, if they win this motion to dismiss, that means they successfully argued that they can do whatever they want with the primary. And I can give you my devil's advocate, what I would have argued if I was the DNC lawyer, if you want me to. Maybe I'll do that now or later. I have to think about that. But the thing is that if they of questioning to actually legitimately pass, then they basically are saying that there's no reason for anyone to ever vote Democrat ever again, because why would you bother with the primary process if we're telling you straight up that it doesn't matter who you vote for, we're going to decide anyway. It literally, if that is true, then the Democrats basically are saying that in every one of the 50 states across the country, every single one of those primary contests is just a charade. We're just doing it because we have to. We're not doing it because we are listening to any of the people that are even showing up. And that is 50 states worth of public funds. The DNC is so stupid. They don't even know that states, or at least they didn't even consider this for their argument. The states locally fund our elections. Public funds. I'm in Washington. Our election here, our primary election, wasn't funded by the Clintons and the DNC. It's funded by Washington state voters. So
real quick, as I'm also from Washington. I caucused in Tacoma. Our caucuses are funded, and I was actually one of the national delegates. Our caucuses are funded by the party, by the local, by each individual LD, then each and every individual CD. Our primary is state funded, but it has no bearing on the actual outcome of the Washington state delegation. It is just kind of for show, is really what it is. The Republicans use it, the Democrats do not.
Well, so step back, though, and try to avoid getting into that, because those are details that are irrelevant, because regardless of the fact that, yes, in Washington, Democrats caucus, but Democrats also have a primary. There's a lot, but just think about it from the fact that doesn't matter. Don't even think about the parties in Washington state. Tax money from Washington state residents, like in every state, tax money that comes out of our income goes to funding our primaries and our general elections. So our tax money is being used for this. So if the Democrats think they can just say, oh, it doesn't matter, they can't actually do that, because they're going in conflict with every single state that has public funds set aside, because they're to be used democratically for that state.
Yeah, I think the idea is that the states wouldn't be funding these things if they were just for show and just a private party event, and didn't actually need the legal protections of a voting system and ballots and all of that, the whole system and the expenses.
That's not something I'm arguing against.
Yeah, but Adair brings up a point that specifically in Washington state, our primary is actually just for show. On the Democratic side, but we state funded it anyway, and then the caucus where the votes that counted was funded by the state party, but then where that money comes from in states across the country, it gets into the weeds a bit. And I agree with Zach that I think that there's a necessary rage and anger at the Democratic Party if this is what they're going to propose. That
sure.
What they're doing is essentially just a charade, a fraud, and if that's where they're at, then that information needs to be shared, and that mainstream media isn't covering it is a disservice to all of us as citizens.
Well, let Zach finish.
Yeah,
come on.
Sorry, go ahead.
He's our esteemed guest. He wrote the book on this. Well, the piece, the list.
So I would recommend that you just, when you're criticizing, when you're thinking about this, I would walk away from state parties and trying to even think about that. Just don't even go to that, because that gets people into the weeds, like you said. The only thing that matters is that states collect money, their residents, and my tax dollars, everyone's tax dollars, is collected in different ways in different states. But public funds are used to fund primary elections, period. You can look and mince whatever you want in whatever state you want, talk about primaries, talk about caucuses. It doesn't matter. Ultimately, if a state party wants to apply for funds, we want government money to help us run our primary, that would not be approved if they were saying, well, the primaries aren't going to be fair, but we need government money for it. So it basically saying and this kind of winds up back to where I was starting, is under the assumption that the primary is not obligated to voters, it basically throws out the whole need for the primary to begin with, and actually, like, they wouldn't even funds public primaries if the primaries were themselves not even being used to determine the party's nominee. So it's just a very simple concept that public funds are used in primaries in every state, and the DNC can't just think that the way that they conduct their primary doesn't have consequences on states that are using public funds, and that public officials are operating the primaries. So the DNC just didn't consider that, I guess. I don't know. It seems like they're just idiots, but it's hard to believe that these well-to-do, rich lawyers couldn't have strung a better argument. I could literally have argued the case for the DNC better as much as I wouldn't have wanted to. I know exactly what I would have argued if I were them, and they're complete idiots. Back themselves into a corner now. So it's like either the case continues and discovery begins, all of the Pandora's box opens, or the DNC win, and it's determined that they can fraudulently, or they can do whatever they want with the party, and basically at that point, no reason to vote for any Democrats in the future. Period. It's completely screwed it.
So I would agree with Zach, right? We don't want to get mired in the overall details of this. This is like the important parts are actually the broad strokes, not the funding structure as it exists at the local, state, and federal level. The broad strokes are that the DNC as a national private entity accepts public funds and is theoretically beholden to a charter that is theoretically legally binding. Right. Right now they're contesting whether it's legally binding on a series of grounds, whether or not you can properly define impartial, which, yeah, unbiased, neutral. I guess these are just synonyms, but whatever. And frankly, they hold, and right now it seems like they're saying that they hold a primary to be entirely performative. It's entirely, theater in order to better raise money, to get people better invested in the process.
It's fraudulent solicitation of participation and money. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So like basically what they are, I probably one of the claims, and I think I've heard this somewhere, that they're a fake charity. They're the human fund from Seinfeld. They're like exactly. The principle of Seinfeld, they're the human fund. They purport themselves as though they are, a nonprofit, part of the government, when really, when push comes to shove, they can just say, well, actually, no, we're a private club. We make our own rules. The Democratic primary is a game of Calvin ball. We don't have to actually, like even the charter itself is performative, and we only have it so that if people, criticize us for being impartial, we can say, oh no, it's actually in our charter. And so what no one should be able to do, right, is look back on the primary process and say people weren't accusing them of being impartial from the beginning, when they were accusing them of fixing the debate schedules to benefit Hillary Clinton, limiting Sanders' access to certain databases, doing all these things. People were screaming they were impartial the entire time, and you had Debbie Wasserman Schultz and other operatives of the Dem Party coming out and promising, no, we are impartial, we are neutral, we are all these things. So if that's, again, playing devil's advocate or reading, I can just pop and shit, Ron, honestly. I know what the answer is. If the case was that you don't even have to be impartial, why, when people accused you of being why people accused you of being biased, did you swear up and down that you were actually impartial? And when you could still collect money. But I think Adair has a comment on this as well.
So I want to jump in, and again, we don't disagree here at all amongst the three of us. I made that distinction just as a Washington State voter, because that is something that is very confusing to a lot of voters, which is actually really beneficial to a lot of the people in the Democratic Party. But I will say this: the moment you actively get involved and you actively start doing things, you find out from the jump, they essentially tell you, we don't have to be partial. I remember sitting in on a caucus meeting, and someone who was running as a Democrat had the state party chair tell her directly, hey, guess what? We don't have to do anything for you. We can choose this person in the primary. Even though it says we're supposed to be impartial, we get to make our choice. Bugger off. That is That's how it operates from the ground up. And they have to maintain, they have to argue, well, no, we have to be impartial, we have to be impartial, we have to be impartial, because so many people just get involved on that surface level of, I vote Democrat, I'm culturally a Democrat, that identity, that tribalism of being a Democrat, and they need to continue that so that way they can continue to exist. But the moment you actually set foot in there and you actually start doing stuff, and I'm glad you wrote about this, Zach, because otherwise people just weren't believing us. When we're telling them, hey, they're incredibly biased from the ground up, people don't believe it because they have this air of being impartial, though the reality is they're far from it, and they know it, and they continue to perpetuate it.
Yep.
And so I mean, I do want to move on to the media, like the media's role both in rigging the primaries. And again, I don't want to quibble over the definition of rigging and cheating, because once you start quibbling over the definition of cheating, once you start getting into those semantics, you've probably cheated and rigged. It's like you know, let's call it what it is. Okay, fine. You're saying you were allowed to cheat, and therefore it's not cheating. Fine, but you did in fact do something that was, biased. Whatever. Another problem for me with this is the fact that, and this is just my personal pettiness and disgust, that we still have to see people like Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Donna Brazile be touted out as some sort of as heroes of the resistance by the DNC, and along with the things that have been said in the DNC by the DNC's lawyer, like it shows a frightening lack of respect for the voters. Both Sanders and Sanders voters specifically, but also DNC voters generally, that they just don't seem to have even a modicum of respect for the time, effort, money that was spent by some during the primary. And, whether or not they defraud them. And then even in the aftermath, they refuse to even kind of show a little bit of humility by removing these people from the public. Public, okay, hey, Debbie Wasserman Schultz did a lot of dirt. Let's stop parading her around. But that's just me. I don't know how you feel about that. How you feel about the fact that they're just being disrespectful at this point, is what I'm trying to say.
They obviously have no trouble. Completely giving the middle finger to everyone in America. So many of these elected officials have done nothing in their, careers besides, do favors for their big money donors ever. So it's not new to any of them, I don't think, in terms of just being like, we don't care about the voters, we're just here as fundraisers. The party has been completely taken over by fundraisers. And so, so many Congress people, and they're all just, what's a congressperson versus a lobbyist versus a campaign strategist? It's like, it's all the same thing at this point. And after the last 4 years of Obama, in his last 4 years, basically everybody was circling the wagons around Hillary Clinton. So all of these people kind of came together before anyone had ever voted, without realizing that it's about the vote. It's not about the strategy to win before the votes begin.
Okay.
To answer that question.
Okay, so I'm gonna put something out there, right? So I agree with everything you just said. Obviously, that we've seen, by nature of over the course of the past few years, the DNC, its internal culture uses the ability to fundraise large amounts of corporate money, specifically as a metric for what is the viability for a candidate. And also a consultant. It's an incestuous consultantocracy. So, but we can move past that, because I want to talk. I follow a lot of news sites on Twitter. Right. I follow, Vox, Vice, Salon, Fox, CNBC, well, not Mother Jones for some reason. I don't know why. HuffPo. I follow all of these places, and I'm constantly inundated with bullshit. Whatever Khloe Kardashian is doing, whatever Stephen Colbert is saying, whatever, whenever Paul Ryan farts at a decibel that's slightly off, I hear it. But but yours is the only piece I've actually seen on this in my feed altogether. So much so that it's gotten so much play, and it's not to knock your writing, right? Obviously, I read it. It's a very well written piece. You're doing a great job. You're doing a great job. But it's gotten so much play. I would have to say partially due to the fact that you're the only one who's writing about this. Rob Schneider tweeted it out, and his acting is a bit whatever, but he's definitely been big in politics. So, what is your perception of the media's role in not only rigging the primary, but also making sure that the primary's rigging just does that this is just not litigated in front of the public?
Yeah. So I think a couple things happened that kind of led to this. First of all, I don't think that the mainstream media was ready for the lawsuit to happen, and as much coordination as the mainstream media has done with the DNC and the Clintons and that whole community, they obviously share notes on everything. That's part of how they rigged the primary. So I expected them to still be all boots on this, to be able to have their messaging strategy lined up for when these hearings would go down. So basically the mainstream media, I expected them to know what the DNC lawyers were going to say. I expected the mainstream media already to have their spin on it ready to go. They are complete hacks to the point that the mainstream media wasn't even ready to know what the DNC's line was to run with. So basically the mainstream media is here completely flabbergasted that the DNC made such a hot ass mess of court. They undid almost everything you say in defense of the DNC can be completely undone by a contradiction that the DNC's lawyer said. And I think that right now they're frantically trying to strategize and figure out what the messaging strategy is going to be, while at the same time looking back at over the past year and a half at all the evidence that the mainstream media colluded with the Clinton campaign. So many of the people that would be writing on this literally were taking notes from Hillary Clinton, approving her articles before they were even published, while blacking out Bernie Sanders, while elevating Trump. The media was an entirely massive force in this election. And basically everything they did was support Trump to help Hillary, black out Bernie to help Hillary, and apologize for Hillary to help Hillary. And so the amount of mainstream media evidence that now exists based on the DNC's interest level in saying, oh, we don't care if we rig it or not, there is now so much evidence that can be, I mean, Jared Beck can literally depose, have a deposition with basically any mainstream media person that was proved in the WikiLeaks was taking marching orders from the Clinton campaign. And so basically all of those people are completely incriminated right now. And so every mainstream media person that's ever written on this in the past that probably is smart enough to be able to report on it, they're probably incriminated in this right now. Not just their network, that person as an individual, that person's financial donations. Like, it's really, really crazy to think about. But we saw how much the media conglomerated around Hillary Clinton. That was everyone. And basically, that's how many people, all of the media entities and all the journalists that aren't writing about it now from a mainstream perspective, probably wrote something positive about Hillary along the way that helped the DNC further this message that she was the candidate, and now don't know even how to backtrack on it because they've said so much, they did so much to support Hillary Clinton's candidacy that there's no way to wipe it all clean, and they don't even know how to go forward because if they put more on the record, they have to in some way justify what's already happened. And it's like they're all completely incriminated. It's insane. That's how widespread the media support was for Hillary Clinton. We never saw it. We didn't see it in 2012 because the press was split basically between Romney and Obama. So there wasn't this type of media conglomeration. All of the media entities wanted Hillary Clinton to win. All of them were going to private, off-the-record meetings with her before the campaign was beginning. We have proof of all that. We literally have proof of Hillary having off-the-record meetings. Literally, they say, we're having an off-the-record meeting of journalists, and it's got all these people, you know, it's like all the idiots, Chris Hayes, all these nut jobs from the major networks coming in and getting the behind-the-scenes, this is what you're going to say about Hillary this week. We have proof of all that, and that's going to all be directly, completely connected to the way the DNC used the media to make people think that the election was fair while supporting a candidate knowing that it wasn't fair. So the media is completely...
Quickly, I just wanted to say that it seems with, as you point out, with all that what could be exposed in discovery, that it might be in the DNC, and not to mention the 2018 elections, that in all likelihood a settlement is probably where they would like to see this go. Like, I don't know if you've been in any more direct contact with Jared about... I know I saw in an interview on The Real Progressive that he wanted to take this all the way. So if they try and settle, do you know where that's at? Or have you heard anything about that?
That's a really good question right now. And I did ask Jared. He hasn't gotten back to me about that yet. So typically at this point, and if I were thinking about what the DNC would do, is they would want to settle this as quickly as possible, because there's no way. The further that this goes in, the more up shit creek the Democrats are. So in a big business, they would want to settle right away.
But with what they've already said and their defenses that they've used, even a settlement implies something that could be devastating or disastrous for the entire party. But continue.
And it's certainly at this phase right now, we're just litigating the motion to dismiss. And so they basically, there's like, from a legal strategy standpoint, they can't say, oh, hey, judge, we're going to file a motion to dismiss. Oh, wait, let's settle. You know, it's like, you can't, that's, if the settlement was the strategy, they probably would have considered that before they considered the motion to dismiss. It's really hard to think about what they would do because you want to think about smart strategy, but then you remember.
Yeah, it's the Democratic Party. So what's the worst possible decision they could make? Because that's probably a higher probability.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Go ahead, Brandon.
No, so I do want to judge. Zach earlier said that the Democratic Party probably isn't that stupid. It's like, no, it's a little, it's, you know, 6 of one, half dozen of the other. They are a little dumb. Like, they're also corrupt, but they're obviously a little bit stupid, right? They have weird priorities. You know, they're beholden to private interests, but they're also incredibly inept because they have this sort of incestuous culture where people who, even though if they fail, as long as you're beholden to corporations, you can still find your way moving up that ladder. Like Debbie Wasserman Schultz is like incompetent. like she's incompetent. Like even like not even so much in the fact that she rigged the primary, which is like okay, whatever, but also because they lost 1,000+ seats under her. So it's hard to deny that she's also incompetent. But I think you know I'm gonna let you go back, Zach. Wow. Anyway, I'm gonna let you go again. I think you make a really good point, right? That there's really no way for a large portions of the media to cover this without, you know, cover this sort of political malfeasance without also implicating themselves by asking, you know, people asking the question, well, exactly how did they make the primary unfair? Let's move away from the word cheating or rigging. I don't really give a shit what, you know, it's all semantics, right? But how exactly did they make it unfair? And what the WikiLeaks have shown, and, you know, it's worth noting that the media has gone after the WikiLeaks as, you know, not journalism. I've seen a lot of Comey's demonizing of them as, you know, intelligence porn. Like, they've been covering WikiLeaks being dragged through the mud, but this has gone uncovered, of course. There's no way for them, you know, as WikiLeaks showed, like everything from the Bernie bro narrative to Sanders being probably, you know, being an atheist, all these things were discussed not only internally with DNC, but with various people at various news organizations. So there's really no way to actually cover this story because, as you said, the same people who would cover it are, you know, they still have their jobs. They weren't fired once WikiLeaks came out. They're still in the exact same places. Probably some of them got raises for, you know, being good, you know, being good stands.
Save Donna Brazil was the only one to get canned.
Donna Brazil was the only one. No, I think also no, you know, Donna Brazil was the only one who kind of lost her job, almost
on CNN. Like CNN. From the news media. Go ahead.
Yeah, most people got promoted, like you said. Most people, and that's part of the way that the media tries to manipulate our view of what they say, is if a media person wrote something completely stupid, like Hillary Clinton's totally going to win, and then she loses, well, the New York Times, who wrote that article that said she was going to win, doesn't want to make their author look bad, so they're not going to. It's so stupid. It's literally completely contrary to common sense. But they're going to be like, oh, let's cover for making, like, reporter looks so stupid. He got that wrong. Well, if we promote him, that'll look like he's still smart. It was just one mistake. So the way that the media and the way that Congress and the way that everyone establishment keeps the people in the same places is part of their strategy to say, look, it's not that big of a deal. If it would have been that big of a deal, this person would have gotten fired. And so it's part of their manipulation tactic to keep people that have been so wrong. They push the wrong narrative. They push a false narrative. It turns out to be false. And then the reason they push that false narrative to begin with is still their goal. So their next step at that point is to promote that person and keep trying to shove it down your throat. It's just a losing strategy, and it's contrary to common sense, but that's how they operate. It's messed up.
Oh, no, definitely. So I think that really the goal of the, you know, let's recap a little bit. The goal of the DNC with having a rigged primary was to establish, you know, manufactured consent for Hillary Clinton as actually winning based on her own merits and, you know, building support for her and for the general election. The media basically functioned as the propaganda wing of the DNC at that point, and with also sort of drumming this beat towards she's inevitable, she's the most qualified candidate, she's you know, she has all this experience, she's, you know, glass ceiling, all these other things that they were saying. And their job was to also build upon this consensus narrative that, like, yes, this is happening, she's happening, but make it seem organic. Right, like they wanted this whole thing from primary to media coverage to seem, or to make her, you know, her ascendancy to the, you know, both her ascendancy to the DNC primary, the Democratic Party candidate, and eventually the presidency seemed organic and not some kind of basically coronation. And now we're here, right? And like, and the last part of that plan didn't work. And not only the last part of that plan did not work, but the entire plan was revealed by nature of WikiLeaks and by nature of hacking and all. Well, not hacking, sorry. Now you got me saying it now. By some means that we are not exactly aware of, and now so now they're forced on the back foot to try to justify this. But I think Adair has a point to make real quick.
But so we say that you just said that the media wanted to seem organic. No, they didn't. They didn't care. And here's a prime example of them not caring if it seemed organic or not. Look at California. Look at the AP calling California well before California could have been called. It was impossible for the state to be called. They did not care. They called it for Hillary Clinton. Someone got a hold of me on Twitter and actually shared with me the name of the journalist who called it, and I don't have it up right now, so I don't remember, but that was something that happened. When you're in Philadelphia, when you're at the DNC, every single journalist you interact with, it was automatically, no, we're going to shut this down. We're going to shut down anybody that's not pro-Hillary. All of the actually, and this, again, just being from Washington State and having interacted with them, parties came together and funneled all of the journalists they could to the most hardcore Hillbots they could possibly find to manufacture that consent. And when you see that kind of consent manufactured, sure, the Hillbots' happiness may have been absolutely overjoyed and may have been absolutely organic, but when that's all you're seeing at a convention where there's almost 2,000 separate Sanders delegates, it becomes obvious. When we did get in contact with the media, every single story they wrote about us while we were there was negative. Every single one. I remember being in a video on the Wall Street Journal where the guy, when I was doing my job live streaming to you folks at home, his exact words were, some of them, all they do is talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, and they don't care about anybody else's experience. That is how they framed it, and there was no way that was coming across organic. Everybody knew that. They didn't give a damn.
No, I
think they might just be that bad at what they're doing.
Yeah, I think they're just dumb. I think they're just bad at their jobs. Like, right now, like they're bad at shilling. It's just like they're bad at they're even bad at manufacturing the semblance of organic excitement and consent. We've seen those pictures, right, of her rallies that are shot from the exact right angle, that make it seem like it's a full room, and then when you zoom out, it's like it's an empty auditorium.
It was a common political trick, but it was so egregious on her side, as if there weren't people looking and watching and paying attention for things like that, and that they weren't going all out trying to sell it as, oh no, this place was packed, like that's what the article would say from the writer that was being towed around on the private jet.
It was like watching
how they literally couldn't feel it. No, she couldn't fill a gymnasium in Seattle. She couldn't fill a gymnasium in one of the most quote-unquote liberal cities in the Union.
It's because she couldn't tell anybody she was coming or where she was going to be, because she knew if she did, she would get way more Bernie supporters there than she would Hillary supporters.
I'm just
Bernie
saying,
filled up an entire stadium, an entire baseball stadium, to the point of overflow where people banged on the wall and we could hear it on the inside and we could literally feel the ground shake. That's all I'm saying.
All I'm saying is that looking at those photos, like watching the behind the scenes of how they filmed the height differences in The Hobbit, right? It destroyed the movie magic. But so I do want to sort of bring this back to Zach and his piece a little bit, although I do enjoy talking trash. So, but apart from that, does anyone have any any more cogent questions? I've asked a bunch already.
No, you I think asked all the questions that any of us would have had the thought to ask. Mr. I talked the entire show.
Thank you. But anyway, so you have anything else to add, Zach? I mean, you're free to join us, of course. But I mean, any other thoughts that you didn't get to put into piece, or where you think this is going to go? How would you defend the DNC's corruption?
So here I'm like thinking about calling up Jared and being like, he and I need to stage a mock debate where I pretend lawyer and I can clown the DNC by showing what they should have argued. Because so basically for me, I was in debate in high school, and I have done just a lot of debate in general, and I'm in the legal industry. And the first thing you learn about having to make an argument is you always want to know what the other side is going to argue. So as part of what you do, you try and build the absolute best argument for your opponent, because you need to have the best argument for yourself, and you can't be completely prepared unless you know what the strongest argument is going to be for your other side. And I think about this stuff all the time, because obviously the Bernie Sanders, the election, it was such a huge crisis, and I was so invested in it emotionally, and I followed everything so meticulously. I know I was telling myself in my head the entire time, this is what they'd argue, this is what they'd argue. And they made a complete fool out of themselves. And I know what they would argue. And I can come to that in a second, the premise of what I think that they should have argued. But I do want to kind of reserve that in my head, because I should either write a piece about that, or I should get Jared to do a
Well, I mean, I think that, I mean, that, I agree. I think you should definitely write a follow piece, because I think you should, you're the only one writing it, so you have to. And I think that, a good takeaway from this as well, a good takeaway from the media's, complicity in silence in the aftermath, is really how damaging the access culture, how damaging the media monopolies, and their ability to fund candidates is, how the way the industry is structured, and the way, basically the demands of actually getting access to the candidates is structured. It's impossible to have a free and fair press. It's impossible, because we still see people now, you mentioned Chris Hayes, and I was in a back and forth with him on Twitter a day or two ago. You see people sucking up to the Clintons, sucking up to this Clinton machine, because they still need access. The Clintons still, in a way, run the DNC, and we now find ourselves dealing with the aftermath of that dynamic, that the media just has to play ball with power. They can't afford to be too critical. They can't afford to be objective, because that's not profitable for them. And they're simply going to do what's profitable, whether that means actually platforming Donald Trump and his hate speech because it gets views, or, doing backroom deals with the DNC as they're doing their own backroom deals, in order to maintain access to the party and to the politicians after everything is said and done. And so, again, we do have to be very critical of the media's role in this, because otherwise, we're going to get a repeat of it. And we're just going to see it happen again and again. And this complete, they're unable to be objective. As soon as you try to be objective, as soon as you try to be too critical, you find yourself losing access, losing money, and access means money, access means your job, access means power, and that's just the way that's just the way Washington works at this point. And so, I mean, you're doing great work. I mean, you're no one to compare to. There's no one to compare you to.
Yeah, I was just going to quickly say that I know a lot of people are angry about what they found out in the DNC lawsuits and what the DNC's been arguing, and a lot of it was just confirming what they already suspected, but were constantly being told and berated for suggesting that was the case, and they're told it was the opposite, and no, they're impartial. And so now that they're upset, what kind of ideas or thoughts do you have moving forward about actions to take to move forward beyond the devastation of finding out the Democratic Party is exactly what we thought they were?
I mean, we need to see how it gets litigated to see what the exact kind of outcome is. But so I don't know if you guys have Shattered, the book about Hillary Clinton's doomed campaign. I'm on an information overload right now, because all last year I was getting, don't shoot the messenger. I was the messenger saying Hillary can't win forever, and everybody was furious that I was the one telling them that. And all of the information, all of the polls, all that stuff we had showed that she wasn't going to win. I totally lost my train of thought. What did you ask me? I have a really good point. I just forgot why.
Oh, talking about
don't shoot the messenger.
In reference to what we do moving forward beyond. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Between Shattered and the DNC lawsuit, so much has come out to confirm all of our suspicions from last year. So many Democrats were saying, no, Zach, you're crazy. No, Zach, it can't be rigged. No, Zach, you think that she could really rig? No, Zach. The number of times people have said no, that couldn't possibly be real, is crazy. And all of that has been proven now between the DNC's lawsuit and Shattered, which is absolutely, I would encourage you guys all read it. It is mind-blowing how humiliating it is for the Hillary Clinton campaign, how terrible they were at everything. There's no defense left for the Hillary Clinton campaign. They can say whatever they want about whoever they want to blame. But besides the fact that they tried to rig it and failed, they also tried to run a winning presidential campaign and failed also. They failed at rigging the primary because it was exposed, and they failed at winning the election because they didn't. And Shattered shows how they failed everything, big picture, and the lawsuit shows how they failed rigging the primary. And so there's really no looking back for any Democrat at this point, because all these people that stopped talking to me last year because they hate me so much because I was breaking this bad news to them. Now it's like they don't have any other points left. So I'm like, oh, did you read that book about the Hillary Clinton campaign that confirmed everything that I observed last year that you thought wasn't true because the mainstream media wasn't saying it? Same thing about the DNC lawsuit. Any Democrat that was like, Zach, how could you? I'm like, look at this and tell me that what do you think about the DNC saying that they could have favored a candidate? Why would you have told me last year that I should vote for this party? Why? Why would you ever say that? And if they can defend it now, like, I want nothing to do with someone who is going to tell me to vote for a party that's not going to listen to me. It completely has undermined every defense they had last year and every defense of anyone who said that Hillary Clinton had a good running campaign, because Shattered showed just how much infighting. Shattered actually really shocked me because I thought that it wasn't, and this is funny because I hate their campaign. I hate the whole warmonger Walmart influence, right? But even me, for how much I resent their stupidity and ignorance and ineptitude, even I was shocked by how terribly they ran this campaign. And when I was observing it last year, there wasn't a thought in my mind that the campaign could actually implode. I figured that they had enough political operatives on the ground that they absolutely, at bare minimum, would have a functioning campaign. This book exposes that campaign could have actually collapsed because of the infighting at any time. And it totally validates how hard we were pushing on the campaign, how hard we were pushing on Hillary Clinton's campaign last year.
Yeah,
the infighting was.
I just wanted to mention we're going to be signing off pretty soon and remind people that Benjamin's going to be streaming on the Intercepts Facebook page, so to make sure to check out there. But just before we let you go, for sure, I wanted, and Brandon will probably have something to say. I just want to make sure that people know where they can find out more about you and the DNC law fraud suit. But go ahead, Brandon, quickly.
I was going to say we're signing off of live, but we're actually going to do a little bit more show after we go off, and after Ben comes on, who's going to be there, as Richard said, on the Intercepts page. And so we're going to keep recording, and we're going to release the extra as as audio only, maybe video. I don't know. I might just whatever, but it's definitely going to be available later. And if Zach wants to join us for that and keep talking trash about the Democrats and the healthcare bill, he's absolutely free to. If he's busy, he can go. And I mean, but exactly, and tell us. I'm sorry. Please, Zach, tell people where they can find you on your Twitter handle, your work, etc.
Yeah. I've got a 7 p.m. I'm on at Real Progressive at 7 p.m. For my weekly show there. So my name is Zach Haller. People like to say Haller, and it's fun, but it's actually pronounced Haller. I'm just kind of getting my everything established as a journalist now that we have no actual real journalists anymore. So Twitter is mostly where you can find me, Zach Haller, ZACHHALER. I have a website, zachhaller.com. I have a Medium account that I cross-post all of my writing to. Some of my writing has been out at Truth Against the Machine. Some of it's on Counterpropa. Some of it's on my video is on Real Progressives more. I've kind of been just kind of doing a lot of writing and putting it out to whoever will publish it at this point. So the best place to find me is my Medium account. But I'm going to keep expanding into progressive media based on our absolute ridiculous need for it. So start with my Twitter and then follow me there.
Sounds great. Oh, we're going to be signing off at least live. Again, like I said, let me reiterate, we're going to be signing off live relatively soon. I do want to say, interesting part about Shattered, too, and this goes back to the media, is it shows us how complicit they were in maintaining this illusion of a competent campaign, because while we were constantly hearing about how dysfunctional Trump's campaign was, this Bannon's in and out, Manafort's in and out, Lewandowski's in and out, like we never heard about the internal struggles and the internal power schisms and all these other things going on in the Democratic Party. It was treated like, oh, they're a well-oiled machine. Look at all the money they have. Of course they'd be a well-oiled machine. And only in the aftermath, and again, had she won, we probably wouldn't be hearing all this stuff, right? This stuff is only coming out because she lost, and that illusion is going. Like, it's crazy how that illusion of not only her campaign but the entire party as a successful, coherent, viable thing just snapped the moment Obama left office, and everyone was like, whoa, they don't have any seats anywhere? they're the minority party in America. When did this happen? I know, even I was like, wow, they're the minority party? Like, I had no idea it had gotten that bad. And the Democrats, they were able, or rather Obama as head Democrats was able to put forth a very powerful glamour on America, at least on the Democratic Party. But yeah, we have to sign off of live. We're going to take a quick break, come back later, and, record this for later. Thank you for joining us, Zach Haller. Haller? Haller. I'm not doing it on purpose. I'm sick, I promise. Thing. I promise. I'm sick and I'm stupid. So I'm
one of those is true, and it's not the sick part.
Thank you for joining us. Again, thanks to all the patrons who have followed us so far. Thank you to Benjamin Dixon Show for hosting us. We'd love to have you on again, Zach. If you've had fun, if you didn't have fun, pretend like you didn't come on again anyway. That's just how it works.
Yeah.
And if you want to become a patron of the Discourse, the link is somewhere in the bottom. I'm prone to e-begging. I'm not too proud. And, have a good night.
Yep. Thanks, Zach, for joining us, and I'll play us out here.
Thank you, Zach, for joining us.
So don't talk when I start playing the music.
My fellow Americans,
How much worse can it get?
I know how disappointed you feel because
The vast majority of the media has said nothing of substance.
this is painful, and it will be for a long time. But I want you to remember this.
the change only happens when ordinary people get involved.
It will not be a peaceful change.
To quote the great Leonard Cohen,
It will be a usurpation.
And to all who are watching this,
Democrats or Republicans,
Whether you are young or whether you're young at heart, I won't stop.
those who ignore these elemental existential facts are traitors, and the usurper will live in infamy.
may God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.